All right. Well, I think we should get going because I want to honor everyone's time. So again, my name is Susan Pratt, and however you found me and my About Page workshop, I'm so happy that you're here today. Um, and I definitely am really looking forward to talking about like the 5 second moment and how powerful it can be. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you all as we go through what you think your 5 second moment could be. So now's a good time if you have an about page, kind of pull it up on a separate tab, or if you just have a Google Doc that has a rough draft of your about page, pull that up, or if you just have a bunch of sticky notes with a bunch of ideas of things that you think you want to include on your about page, pull those up as well. As we go through today's workshop, you can start looking at what you've got with a more discerning eye towards what content is going to help your audience see that you're the solution versus content that, while informative, doesn't really give them a reason to learn more. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, which I clearly forgot to do before. Okay. Let's see what we got here. Okay. All right. And let's get started. Okay. So let's be honest. When writing your about page, just out of curiosity, before I go any further, can you all see the whole page or is
Yes.
you
Yes.
can? Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure. So when you're writing your about page, it's a little bit like trying to pack up your entire house into a duffel bag. You want to take everything with you. Everything feels important, right? But when you try and do that, what you end up with is a jumbled pile, and it doesn't. You can't find anything that you're looking for, right? So, and that's the mode we go into when we're faced with a blank screen and we are faced with the task of writing about ourselves, which really no one wants to have to do, right? Because it just feels so vulnerable and open and like bearing your soul to the world. And so, what our brain starts to do is start picking off the things off the shelf that we think are important. And so, a lot of us sit down and start to think like, oh, like where do I start? Do I go all the way back to college? Do I go to the work study program job that I have? Do I start with my first corporate job? And oh, like I'm really in a different place than I was before. So how do I connect those things? And oh, and now I also have to include this information. I got to include things that make me relatable. So maybe I'll talk about, hiking and my, love of oat milk lattes. And what happens when we try that is that we are saying all the things that we think our audience needs to know. But the result is a page that, while it has a lot of information about you, there's no reason for people to lean in and say, I want to hear more. I want to know what it's like to work with this person. So today we're going to start to fix that, not by adding more, but by figuring out what actually needs to stand out on your about page. So we're going to be searching, doing some looking for that one moment that makes your reader feel something, the thing that earns its space in the duffel bag. So if you want to put it, we actually don't have that many people live. So if you want to unmute yourself to answer these questions, that's great. Otherwise, if you want to put in the chat, what's one thing you've included or debated including on your about page that you're thinking, maybe it belongs there, maybe it doesn't?
Okay.
And I will also, I think the only way for me to see the chat, is to is to stop sharing. So I will just have to periodically.
Well, Susan, the first thing that
Oh
comes
wait,
to my mind.
Anna, you're muted, but Lynette, go ahead, and then Anna will go. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
First thing that comes to my mind is I don't want to go back 30 years ago. Personally, I just don't
Right.
wish to do that. You know, I live a different life than what I did 30 years ago. I don't want to start explaining what I went to college for. And then, I did that for so many years. And then I became a mother. And then I went back to work, but I did something else. To me, that's a waste of who wants to hear all that. I think it should be all pertaining to what I'm doing now.
Oh,
And that's
That
where,
is
that's
very,
where I'm
very,
stuck
very
too.
smart. Yeah, very, very, very smart, because that is actually a key point. You want to start as close to the end as possible, right? So the point that you want your audience to be seeing, that's where you want to start, right? So I totally agree with you about that. Anna, what were you going to say?
so I did have the about page, and it was just ridiculous. It was a book. And I took it down, and it's not even, the label's not even up there for the link because I'm editing it. And I had a client who booked me for a presentation, a training, and then a presentation, not a copywriting gig. But then he's like, well, I need to know your history. I need to know all your safety certifications and all your training and where you went to college and how many sites you've inspected and what went wrong and are you OSHA? And I thought, oh my Lord, how do you put that? My website is writing and speaking. So how do you put that? Because I eliminated it because I thought this is ridiculous. I have 15 years of all of this, and some people want it and some people don't.
That's one of those things, this is a little off topic, but that's one of those things you could just link to. Like here, have it like a separate page. Don't have it on your about page. On the about page, have, link to safety certifications. That way the person who needs to find those can do it, but it's not diluting your about page.
That's awesome.
Everybody else, right? Yeah. So that's what I would recommend for that. So yes, I think these are all great things, and we've highlighted the things is how much you include. There is so much you could include, and Linda, even in the portion of what you want to include, even if you're not going back 30 years, even if you go back 10 years, I think you can probably shrink it down to shorter than that. But as we go through the workshop, we can chat about that. A little bit more. Okay, let me go back to sharing.
Well, how many words?
Sorry, what were you saying, Lynette?
You want to say it should your about page be? How many sentences or how long should your about page appear?
Well, I honestly truly think that is up to you. I mean, I think depending on how long you've been doing what you're doing, maybe has a component to that. I'm not sure. For the purpose of this workshop, it's not so much about how long it needs to be. It's about, do you have the right information in there? Because with that right moment in there, it doesn't have to be that long, right? People are going to lean in and be like, she's the one. And we'll talk a little bit about how you develop that moment.
Okay.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So I had my message pretty well honed in on what I'm doing, but back in the day I had a tech company and I've really gotten into that again. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wanting to start offering those services, but it's so far outside of what I've been doing of helping develop women using neuroscience and helping them get over the fear of speaking. Ooh. So I don't know how to combine those. That's one thing I'm very interested in, but I look at my LinkedIn website, everything has been very accurately branded to what I was doing. But when I step outside of that, then I'm not sure what to do. And obviously people want to see something for that as well.
Yeah. And I think maybe the key to this, and again, a little bit outside the scope of the workshop, but I do understand what you're saying. It may be that you have your about page, but then you also have, just like I was suggesting to Anna, links to these other, on the about page, links to these other things that when people come to their about page, they'll see that main through line of what you want to be talking about, that, it's including your 5-second moment. But then it will also, if there's additional information, if there's additional credentials or things like that people want to see, then they'll know to click there. I think really the gist of where I'm going with this, the 5-second moment in the about page, is that you don't need, in a lot of most cases, you don't need all those credentials, and it just waters down everything when it's all there, right? So it may just be a matter of segmenting that information. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Sounds
You're
good.
welcome. You're welcome. Okay. Share. Okay. Okay, great. So here's the really good news. People don't need your entire backstory in order to decide if you are the one. I know we were just talking about degrees and certifications and that type of thing, but your about page doesn't need to have those all listed and included on the about page. It's probably better off to segment it off to a different link where you do list all those things, because that's not, people may be looking for that data, those facts, to make sure that you're qualified. But those facts and data are not going to be the thing that convinces them you're the one. So they're not looking for the part about how, a little bit like what Lynette was talking about, not the part about how you started in real estate 25 years ago and then you made a switch to this other thing and now you're doing this other thing. They're also not particularly interested in your full pivot arc from corporate to coaching to consulting. And believe it or not, they don't need a paragraph about your hiking habit, the fact that people call you the spreadsheet queen, or that you've always been the go-to person since high school. I have no doubt that all of that is true. But what actually connects people together are moments of trust. And that is what we're looking for today, is the moment when something changed and it can illustrate, this is who I became, and it shows how I can help. So maybe it was the day, a lot of these I can relate to. Maybe it was the day you sat in yet another meeting about deliverables that you really didn't care about, and you thought, oh, is this really all there is? Maybe it was a time when you were working with a client and they said something like both simple and profound, like, you helped me make a decision without panic, and you realize, wait a second, I'm not just helping people manage their money, I'm helping them trust themselves. Or even, and this was me, even when you make a decision, when you say, I'm tired of being really good at something I don't actually want to be doing.
Oh.
So it's this type of subtle shift, a nudge. Some people call those winks from the universe, right? That these are the kinds of moments that stick. They're rarely dramatic, but they are always real. And once you find that moment, this you can use everywhere. Yes, definitely on your about page, but you can also use it in your bio, on your sales pages, when you're pitching a podcast, any place where you're introducing yourself, you can use a version of your 5-second moment. And this is actually what I help clients with, build into their messaging across all the different platforms. Because once you've named it, it's a constant through line for how you talk about your work. But today we're going to keep our focus on the about page because it's a basic and familiar place to start. But just know that this actually has ripple effects to far beyond just the about page. So go ahead and either pop into the chat if you want, or you can just raise your hand. When you look at your current about page, what are you leading with? Are you leading with a timeline, or are you leading with a turning point? And I know Dorinda can only use the chat, so I will stop sharing for just a second. Anna, it's not wrong. It's how we all do it. Anna said, I lead with a timeline and credentials. So wrong, right? There isn't really anything wrong. It's accurate, like you're not lying about it. So it's not really wrong. It's just, is it going to pull people in, right? That's really the question that you need to be asking. But I think Anna's experience is very much like, is very much like ours. Oh, I love that, Dorinda. A turning point for Joy Ambassador. That is actually a really great observation, that you were able to kind of nail down this moment when things really did shift for you. So yeah, hopefully you can share a little bit more about that as we keep going. Okay. Okay. All right, let's keep going here. All right. So, welcome to finding your 5-second moment. I first learned this term from Matthew Dix, and Matthew Dix is a teacher and a storyteller extraordinaire. He has won multiple Moth Grand Slam competitions, which for those for whom that's a new term, it's like the Super Bowl of live storytelling competitions, like on stage, people voting for you, and being declared a winner. So he talks about the 5-second moment as moments that are not big or dramatic. They're quiet, they're internal, and they're just like the ones we're looking for today. If you're looking to go deeper into storytelling, I definitely recommend you check them out after the workshop, but don't open a separate tab now. Stay with me, but Matthew Dix is the person. So if you had to say, On a scale from 1 to 10, if 1 is I wrote my about page under duress, and 10 is my about page sounds like me on my best day, where would you rate yourself? I like a 2. Right? I agree. I think a lot of people feel like, you know what? I had to get something up there. Like my website wasn't complete without it. I needed to put something there, and this is what's gonna stand in there. I guess my next question for you guys would be, when was the last time you looked at your about page, like with an eye to revising it? Website zero. I hear you. I hear you. Because somehow it is easier to update a short bio on LinkedIn, or your headline, than it is to actually like commit to, like, okay, the about page has to be a certain number of paragraphs, and we have to write something that's going to get people to relate to me. So whereas you don't necessarily have to be quite as relatable on LinkedIn, and not in the same way. So, and Anna, last night I became ill. Okay, that was kind of funny. Oh, Lordy. Okay. All right. So we've talked about, I've been talking about this up until now. Not dramatic, it's usually not big with a lot of fanfare. But let me give you an example from my own life. So years ago, I was working for Girl Scouts. That's what it's called in the US. I think in Canada and Europe, it is called Girl Guides. And one March night, I found myself alone in a cold parking lot at 11:08 p.m., hours after everyone else had gone home, gone to bed, had dinner, gone to bed. And I was loading dozens of cases of Girl Scout cookies into my minivan because a troop needed them and a cupboard had run out. And I was going to do just about everything to keep things moving. It was late. I was tired. Did I mention it was cold? And I remember thinking, I'm not making a difference. I'm busting my butt to maintain the status quo, and barely at that. That moment absolutely did not come with fireworks or a dramatic decision, but it did shift something. And eventually, it led me to be okay walking away from that role, not being fearful of what I was leaving behind, but looking forward to what I knew I could build. And that's what we're looking for today. Not the whole story. I didn't tell you how long I'd been at Girl Scouts, how many supervisors I had, how many projects I worked on. Um, nor did I go back further and say that I'd stayed home for 10 years to raise my family, and this was the first job I had after taking time off. None of that, because while maybe that's interesting to some people, it's not going to get you closer to this point of why am I doing what I do now, and why that is important, like why that moment was important for what I'm doing now. So if you can just give me like a quick hand raise of, does that help give you a feel for the kind of moment we're talking about? Yes, I saw a hand raise from Anna. See some nods from Lynette. Perfect, great. So start thinking as we continue to start thinking about a moment like that, something that small that stayed with you. And maybe this is a moment that you haven't thought about in a really long time. But if it comes to you, just jot it down because you'll want to tap into that later. Okay. So just to review, as you continue to think about possible 5-second moments, let's cover what a 5-second moment is not, right? So I think we all know now it's not your full backstory. It's not the job titles or the certifications. And believe it or not, it's also not a big dramatic breakdown or an awe-inspiring comeback story. Why is that? It's because these stories usually focus on what happened, not what shifted, right? So sometimes these stories can be the catalyst for the 5 second moment, but the actual story of what happened, usually not. And believe it or not, it's usually not a client win either, regardless of how impressive that client win is. And that's because the client win belongs to them, not you. Even if you were instrumental in helping them get there, that the shift that happens, that moment belongs to them. And the reason that all of these aren't really 5 second moments is because they are examples of reporting what happened, where you were, what you did, what you accomplished. But storytelling is about what changed, what shifted, and why it matters. So the 5 second moment is about you. So go ahead and jot down, I'll give you just a minute or so to jot down what is something that you included on your about page that sounded important and you were like, oh, it definitely has to be on there, but didn't really show how you had grown or changed. So I'll give you just a minute to like think about it or jot it down because we're going to come back to this idea a little bit later.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Yes, sure. Is what's something you included on your about page or have considered putting on your about page because it sounded important, but it didn't really show how you had grown or changed.
But it didn't show.
It did not show how you had grown or changed. So I'll give you just another 30 seconds or so to think about that. Okay. So while you're still thinking about that or looking at your about page, one of the clearest ways to spot the difference between storytelling and reporting is a report is what happened. It's the timeline, the facts, the steps you took. This usually can sound very professional and probably pretty polished. It just doesn't reveal anything about you. It reveals information about your path, but not actually about you. But a story, on the other hand, is what changed. It showed us your perspective, not just the steps you took. And it's the moment when something clicked. And even if no one else noticed it at the time, I can guarantee you, standing in that cold parking lot in March, there wasn't a single soul around. And it was probably months before anyone really realized, or before I even mentioned it to anybody, that like something had changed. So, how can you tell if you're reporting or if you've got the beginnings of a 5 second moment for storytelling? So let's try it out using something you've already written. And you don't need to overthink it. We're just looking at stuff you've already written through a new lens. So find a sentence from your about page, your bio, or an intro post maybe that you've used for like networking or something, and just read it out loud to yourself and think, does this sound like I'm like a report or does this sound like a story? And if you are comfortable sharing out loud with a group, great. If you want to put it in the chat, that's fine as well.
I can mention it real quick.
Yeah, great.
Mine was simple. I stated it's gone now. I need to make a new one, and that's why I thought this would be great. But it did say something to the effect that I've been a network marketer now for 5 years.
Right. So
That's
in your
not that's not a story. That's not
right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
No,
I chose that it sounds more like a report than a story. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. And we all do this, right? Well, for a couple of reasons. We do it because we think this is information people want to know about us.
Right.
And let's be honest, it's a lot easier to report on things that have happened rather than kind of looking inward and being like, well, like, why does this matter? Like, why, what happened that caused me to go this other way, right? Or to do something different, or to make, to make this change. And I think it's because sometimes those shifts are hard to see. They're just not at the forefront of our mind. And sometimes they feel really vulnerable too. That's the other piece to it. Like, is it, you're thinking to yourself, is this something I want to share? But there are absolutely ways to share it that, don't make it feel like you're bearing your entire soul on your public website, right? So,
Huh.
Right. And at the time I wrote it, I became a network marketer because I was living on this little island called Maui and everything had shut down. And so I used to be an employee of Tommy Bahama, and I had to learn how to do something from my computer, which I didn't have any experience on. So it was COVID that made me make that shift, but I didn't want to put that out there. So eventually I became a network marketer, or I've been 1 year into network marketing, or 2 or 3. It's just time for me now to say my story differently. Yeah.
100%. I think that's exactly right, though. Now that part of your story isn't nearly as important because you're doing these other things. So, Lynette, as we go through, I'm going to encourage you to think about, okay, what are the things that happen between the network marketing gig and what I'm doing now, right? And in there, I think is the fertile ground for your 5-second moment. Like, it may take some uncovering, but I think that's probably where it's living. Anna, did you have something to share?
My one page of my bios, they read like reports because I gave a presentation a month ago, and the lady got up who introduced me. She just blah, 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 read it. And I was thinking, oh my Lord, that's terrible. But I wrote it and gave it to her. So hearing this, I think it should involve, because I write and speak about safety and people think, ew, safety, OSHA, training, emergency response, disaster preparedness. But if I change that to, as I was literally looking through the ashes, sifting through the ashes in my burned down home, suffering fatality, I went, I've got to help people know how to get through this.
Yes. And so here's the thing. For you, the house burning down, that was the container that contains your 5-second moment, right? The shift was, whatever you were doing before, I don't want to do that anymore.
Yep.
I've had this experience, and that experience has caused me to be like, I want to do this other thing. So it wasn't so much the experience. Yes, that's the context. You definitely want to include the context, right? But imagine if she had started off this introduction of saying, this is Anna, she's our keynote speaker for today. 5 years ago, Anna's house burned down. And when she went back to look and salvage what she could, Anna realized that she was so grateful that she and her dogs and her husband had escaped, and she didn't want anyone else to ever have to experience this. And then you go into, whatever additional thing. Because if she'd started off that way, now everyone listening is like, oh, like, this is different. Like, this isn't just some random OSHA person, right? This is actually somebody who's had this experience.
Sad thing is, though, the dogs died in the fire. You didn't know that, but they did.
I didn't know that. Okay,
but
well,
I now tell people that I was prepared because we had the emergency bags, we had everything documented, and unfortunately the dogs didn't make it out, even though we did drills. But that was when I said, I am going to help people for the rest of my life. And I'm not just going to write copywriting for marketing agencies. I'm going to write content and give speeches and presentations to help people. So I never thought about using that moment, because and Gone with the Wind, as God is my witness, I actually was like holding ashes going, I will help people. Yeah.
And that's the moment people are looking for. That's the moment when they're like, she's had this lived experience, and this is why she's doing what she's doing. and now that there's a story involved, they're far more likely to remember Anna, the person who lost everything in a fire, rather than just some stodgy old person who, has this long list of credentials about why they.
An OSHA trainer, an EMTI, an emergency instructor.
Right.
God,
right.
Oh my
Right.
goodness. That's amazing, Susan.
All right, I love it. I love it that we're making some progress here. That's so great. Okay. Um, so now that we're starting to look a little bit more closely, trying to find our moments, I want to share an example that I'm again borrowing from Matthew Dix, and I found it super helpful to really be able to determine the difference between reporting and storytelling. So we're going to talk a little bit about Titanic. Yes, the movie Titanic, but possibly not in the way that you are thinking of. So when you think of Titanic the movie, who or what do you think the story is about? Now, I'm going to preface this with yes, we know that it was about a real event, the Titanic setting launch on its maiden voyage and crashing into an iceberg and unfortunately sinking, right? That's the container, but that's not the actual story of the movie. So, what is it you think that the story of Titanic is about? Just going to stop share just to see if there's anything in the chat.
I don't know. I see it as there's the main character, the lady who's telling the story of her life and how one different choice or decision can go a different direction.
You're on to something. Yes. Yes, yes. Anna, you're right. There is that component of why did the ship fail to navigate fail to navigate around the iceberg? Yes. Actually, the story is about Rose, right? So a little bit of what Lynette was leaning into there. It's not about Jack. And I know it's very tempting to be like, oh no, the story is about Jack and Rose and their romance and what it could have been if the Titanic hadn't sunk. So that's true. There is a love story component, and Jack does play a role. But here's the thing: Jack doesn't change. He is the same person from when he rushed on the Titanic when it was just about to leave, as he is when he's hanging on to the door in the North Atlantic. He's bold, he's spontaneous, free spirited, willing to take risks, knows who he is. There's no transformation arc here. There's no before and after for Jack. He's the same before as he is after. He is there to disrupt Rose's world, not change his own. But Rose, on the other hand, starts the movie stuck in a life she didn't choose, engaged to someone who, frankly, didn't really seem like he cared about her, and following rules that not only did she not make, but she felt were controlling her. And by the end, she's chosen her own path. She's left behind the version of herself that was just performing for other people, and she is now a different person. Admittedly, the Titanic sinking had a big piece to that, but it wasn't the Titanic sinking that changed her. She was already changing before the Titanic sank, and then that's the catalyst for allowing her to be like, you know what, I'm doing my own thing. I'm not gonna continue on in the life that I had. And that's what makes it her story, because the story is about change. So that's kind of a visual for the type of moment we're looking for you. And if at this point you're thinking, Susan, I have no darn idea what my 5-second moment is, that is okay. That's actually really normal. And in fact, your 5-second moment might already be hiding in plain sight. Anna, we were just talking a little bit about probably where yours, a good place where yours might be living. But it could be in your about page, but somehow it's couched and sounds like more like a job description. Maybe it's something you said offhand to a client or a friend, actually, and they lit up and they were like, oh my God, like I never thought of it that way. And maybe it's a story you told once in a podcast interview, but a lot of stories, it just kind of, evaporated after that. You've never gone back to re-look at that. So now is an opportunity to look at those moments differently with an eye to not just what happened, but what changed. And just to be clear, Your 5 second moment doesn't need to involve floating on a door in the North Atlantic, right? It doesn't have to be dramatic because it very rarely is it. It's about the moment that something shifted. So the next step that we're going to do is just about identifying that moment. So the goal of this exercise is just to get your wheels turning about the before and the after. So I'm going to put a couple of examples in the chat. Let's see if I can get those into the chat. Hold on a second here. But it's basically using this format of I used to X, but now I Y. And you can come up with a lot of examples. Like there's not just one, right? A lot, you can have like different 5 second moments depending on, the audience that you're talking to. So just if you, I'm going to give us like 5 minutes, look at my watch, 5 minutes to just think about like how you could answer some of these questions. Yeah, Lynette.
I do have a question, and I've been asking this for quite a few years now, and I can't seem to come up with an answer. I everyone, well, I can't say everyone. I don't know how to say this. It seems as though most people in life have a passion. I had a passion, and that was for me, raising my children to the best of my ability to
Yeah.
teach them as much as I could teach them before, they were released and they went on and did their own world. I'm still looking for that passion. So I think that's why I shifted gears from going from, medical sales to I moved to Hawaii. Basically, it was survival, whatever jobs you could find it to if you wish to stay there. And now I'm still doing this from 5 years ago when COVID hit. And it's not like I don't feel passionate about it at all. I took a break for 3 months. I wrote a children's book. I enjoyed it, but it's a hobby. It doesn't pay my bills.
Right.
So I keep wondering what aha moment is going to hit me that takes me, I'm hoping, to my next passion. And I don't know how to ask myself in any other different way. Will I recognize it? And then why does it feel like it's taking so long? I'm that person that has their, hands and feet and everything, and I love everything. But I'm talking about passion. It's way above things I enjoy. So
Yeah.
anyway, I guess I want to ask you would you happen to know how? Because even answering that question is very hard for me to answer.
Um, yeah, I just wanted to finish putting one of these examples in the chat. So hang on just one
Okay,
second because
no
my
worries.
brain is going to go in 5 directions.
No.
Okay, so I put two examples in the chat. So in fact, I know this is kind of out of my scope of zone of genius. Um, but I think your 5 second moment doesn't necessarily need to be about what you are passionate about. I think it is more about the moment or a moment when you decided to do something different for you. We all make decisions about I need to have a job. I need to go find a job, right? I need to do these things to support my family. I need to do these things to support my children. And while the 5 second moment maybe is found in those experiences, it probably isn't because those are things that we do because well for like a it could be for a lot of reasons. Like we do them because like we have children, we need to support them. We do them because we think this is what we're supposed to do, right? God gave us these children and we're supposed to raise them, right? So to use that example of raising your children, one place where you could look for a 5 second moment is what happened when your kids launched, right? Like they're no longer living at home, they're living their own life. Did you start living your life differently? Did you start, whereas maybe before you were focused on their activities, maybe you were focused on family dinners, maybe you were focused on family activities such as going and to your house of worship, those just examples, right? But did you start doing something differently once your children were gone? And the reason I'm suggesting that that could be a place to look is because when you start, when you like have that kind of shift, that's then that starts dictating your actions, and your actions then start taking you, and your actions then it shifts your beliefs then dictate your actions. So that is a place to start. I'll be honest, like that moment in the cold March day took me a really long time to find, right? I clearly had experienced it, but didn't really think that much about it. But when I went back and reflected on it, then that's really when I found it and really realized that was a pivotal moment for me. So I think it's probably in those moments of change that's fertile ground for looking for your 5 second moment. Um, will you know it when you see it? Maybe it might take some, as you commented before, it's a little bit about sometimes being still and being quiet. And it's sometimes in the stillness that you realize the significance of that, of what happened. But it does require like an internal, kind of like an internal shift, an internal, like an internal reckoning, more to the point. So, I know Anna had to hop off for just a second to go check on her dogs.
I used to blank, but now I blank.
Yeah, and this is a good place to start. I mean, I put some examples in the chat. Like, some other examples could be like, I used to do everything for other people, but now I take time for myself, right? That can indicate like some kind of shift. Um,
Yeah,
oh, what was that last part?
that was true. And I've already learned that. I've already had that shift. I couldn't say no. I just was always
Right.
helping others, always helping others. I thought you should help others. That's what I thought I should do.
Yeah.
But I now have learned to say no, thank you, or cancel. I never could cancel. Now I cancel
Right. Right.
because
And
I
those
do
are
it for me. Yeah.
100%. Those are all fertile places for you to find, like, where these shifts are. But it's not, chances are, even when you find it, you may not immediately recognize the significance of it.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, but it's a good place to start. So, okay, well, let me go back to here we go. Okay. All right. All right. So, oh, this is not what I meant to do. Sorry. I meant to stop sharing. That is actually what I meant to do. Sorry about that. Share. All right. Um, so I think so when you kind of building on what we were just talking about, Lynette, is
Mhm.
when you find that moment and you're looking to build a story about it, right? About, how you are, how you got to where you are, and the work that you're doing now, is you can think about, what does this moment show about how I work or how I move about in the world? What does this moment help my audience feel or trust about me? And what's one way I could bring this moment to the start of my about page, even just a sentence? And we can go back to the example we were talking about with Anna just a little bit ago. Instead of starting off with, Anna is a certified safety instructor and
Right.
she works for blah, blah,
Right.
blah, 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 right? you start off with 5 years ago, Anna's house burned to the ground, right? You give the context, and then the moment where she's sorting through the ashes, and she says, I don't ever want anyone to ever experience this any again. I am going to now. I'm going to work towards helping people keep their family and loved ones safe, right? So that, and as we were saying, imagine how much more receptive the audience would have been to listening to what came next when you start with that. So those are the things to kind of consider when you think maybe you've got something. Is what does it show about how I work? What does this moment help my audience understand, feel about me? And how can I bring this further up into my intro or further up onto my about page or the early part of my introduction? And here's the thing, this is like a journaling exercise. There's no perfect answer to these. And actually reflecting on just one of these questions can then bring you to other places as well. This is exactly the kind of work I do with my clients when we work on their messaging. We write down first, like, where are they starting? And once we see what that moment reveals is when we can start building everything out around that. Because ultimately what you're wanting people to remember you, right? You remember what you do. This is how people can refer you. This is how people, maybe they don't need you now, but maybe they need you a month from now, right? And if they can remember your story, they are far more likely to reach out and be like, hey, this is my thing. So, if you're thinking here, if you're watching the replay or you're here live and you're thinking, okay, like I know it shifted for me, but I'm not sure how to shape this into something that my audience will feel. That's a sign. Like, that's a sign that you've done this is where the real work truly begins, and where I begin with my clients. So now that you spent some time sitting with what could be a 5-second moment, and Anna, maybe I'm going to put you on the hot seat. Let's just think about how you could phrase that, right? How could you take that moment and have it be the opening of your about page, or the opening, maybe not so much the opening of your about page, but even the opening of the one-sheeter you give to somebody who's presenting it, like someone who's introducing you as a speaker.
Well, part of me is, I think starting off with the question helps, because I have been speaking and writing so much lately about when you hear that siren or you hear that alert, what are you going to do? What are you going to take with you? And people are like, what do you mean? Are you going to grab your computer, your phone, your this or that? Well, I've been there through flood and fire. I'll tell you what I did. I was prepared, so I had this, but I wasn't prepared because I didn't have this.
Right.
Does that make sense?
And yes. And when you can phrase this is like, I thought I was prepared. I thought I knew what I was going to do. I had my go bag. I had taken these precautions. But in that moment, like when the fire, like when I had to flee and coming back and seeing what was left of my house, holding the ashes of everything that I thought was so important to me, I knew I didn't want anyone else to ever go through this, and that I was going to help to make sure more families didn't have this experience, right?
Exactly.
That's not the exact story, but it's, in the vein of what we're talking about, right?
Exactly, because that really, prior to that, I was an OSHA trainer, OSHA inspector, a construction safety manager, or blah, 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 an EMTI on ambulance in the emergency room, and I was prepared for all of it, and then it happened to me.
Yeah.
And
that's the moment
sort of
that
prepared,
it changed.
and then I wasn't.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really the moment that it changed, because the work you're doing now, correct me if I'm wrong, the work you're doing now is different than the work you were doing before.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Because I'm thinking it's more, correct me again if I'm wrong, but it's more in service. Like, it's more like teaching people to be prepared,
It's interesting, because when I used to say I used to teach because I was an employee of a company. Now I guide and share because I've
Mm.
lived it. I've been there.
Yeah.
And I'm no
Yeah.
longer an employee of a company where like, hey, Anna, go inspect this site and go train this thing. Now I do it because it comes from my heart.
Yes. 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 So, you know, I absolutely think opening with a question works, but also consider this. 5 years ago, Anna was holding the ashes of her entire life in her hands,
Ooh.
right? And then you can give the context of what happened, right? And you can give the context of I thought I was prepared. She thought she was prepared. She thought she knew everything she needed to do. And yet her house was, devastatingly, her house was, was burned down. And when she was holding those ashes is when she was like, yeah, I'm not going to continue doing what I'm doing now, right? I want to move into service and make sure that as many people as I can reach um, know what they need to do, or to be prepared. Something along those lines.
This is
right?
great. Yes, because I've been thinking this, I just didn't know how to do it. So that it's a little longer than 5 seconds. So my little thing was, is it 5 seconds? Is it 10
Well, so
seconds? But I
here's the
love this.
thing. The shift is 5 seconds. The shift
Okay.
is you holding the ashes and
Oh,
being like, I'm doing
yeah.
something different, right? Yes, you have to give some context. You can't just start with, well, I was holding ashes and decided to do the thing, right? You gotta like, just like in Rose's story in the Titanic, you had to give the story of, the Titanic and the boat and,
Yeah, otherwise they'd be like, are you a priest? How did you get the ashes? Are we talking Ash Friday? What the
right.
hell?
Yes. I mean, so there's definitely, you definitely have to build like the context, but the context just doesn't have to be the entire history.
Love
Even
it.
in the story of Rose and Jack, like we don't know what Rose was doing 5 months earlier. We don't even know what Jack was doing 5 months earlier, right? The story started at the point at which at which the boat came in. So that's the thing. That's the other thing that I learned from reading a lot about Matthew Dix. You want the ending to be as close to the beginning as possible.
Oh,
You want it to be as short a path as people need to travel to understand why they should work with you. Right? Why would they want to lean in and learn more? Right? Which is why you don't need all the backstory. You don't need to explain how long you lived in Arizona. You don't need to explain when the house was built, like all of those details. Maybe they were pertinent to why the house caught on fire, but even if they were pertinent, it doesn't get it's still too much information. The
yeah.
other image, the other image that that Matthew Dix talks about is you don't want to give too many people to step off the path, right? So when you give them a lot of not extraneous, but a lot of information, sometimes what'll happen is they'll be like, wait a second. And then they'll especially if it's in an audience, they will mentally walk away trying to figure out whatever that piece is. By the time they come in, now they've missed the whole story. So
Yes.
now they've missed the key point here.
Yes.
So, and it works the same way in writing too, right? Because you don't want to start off with something and then have it take so long to get to your 5 second moment that people have already navigated away, right? So it works differently, but it works in the same concept. It does work for both the writing and speaking a story.
Susan, I was thinking, just hearing all of this could bring me back to some messaging, copyright messaging for companies that provide safety equipment, safety preparedness, all of that.
Yes,
That's
because
amazing.
here's the thing, they should be telling stories too, which is like a whole other workshop. But right, but yeah, that's Matthew Dix wrote a book about stories that sell. Stories sell is what it is, and it's about how businesses can tell stories, right? So, but he goes in, like I said, it's an interesting read, but it talks about the fact that everybody has a story. Everybody has a story, even when they think they don't have a story, they totally have a story, right? So, so yeah, I hear you on that one. Hang on a second. Let me just see. Yeah, so I think we kind of covered. Lynette, was there anything you wanted to share? Anything that had come up for you that could be the beginning of a 5 second moment?
No, other than, I have had some aha moments. They're just not related to what I'm doing right now. And I'm
You know
searching
what?
for,
Don't worry if they're not related to what you're doing right now. And the reason I tell you this is, you know what I'm no longer doing? Putting cases of Girl Scout cookies in the back of my car, right? But that in there was my 5 second moment, right? So
um,
don't discount those. And like I said, this is sometimes you have to kind of like marinate on it. Like it's not going to come to you. It might come to you in a flash of inspiration, but sometimes it comes to you in the quiet moments. But I would write those down and be like,
yeah,
okay, when you write those down, what does this tell me? Does this shed some light as to why I do things differently than I used to? Does it shed some light on why I think about things differently than I used to? Or what does it say about like how I move through the world? And am I moving through the world differently than I did before? Those are all signs that there might be something there.
yeah.
About
I'm looking for that aha moment, that shift, that 5 second moment within my work structure, more specifically. That's what I,
yeah, and but here's the thing, and it may come to you, right? You may absolutely find it. The more, the what is the saying that I know I've heard? It's like where your attention goes is where your action goes, or something along those lines. So now that you're like actually kind of like thinking and looking for it, you're more likely to see those moments. But
okay.
even if you just want to practice with moments in your personal life, that will
Mhm.
also help kind of sharpen your focus or sharpen your lens, so to speak,
Mhm.
so that when you apply it to your work, you can see more of those moments in your
Okay.
work
I mean,
as well.
it's hard to explain. I come from a very large team and I watch how everybody does their own way of, working.
Yeah.
Because, you own your own business, but you can collaborate and work with others
Sure.
and make it bigger. And I'm trying to, I don't know what it is. I'm seeking for my style, my niche, that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
And different.
And
I'm ready to end this road I'm on and take a new path. And I haven't figured out what the path is. But I'm ready.
yes, yes.
Okay, I don't know what it
And
is yet.
and you know what? The more you think about the more you kind of can focus on these moments, the more clarity you can get about like really where
Yeah,
you wanna go next.
yeah.
So yeah, so
I'm looking at podcasts right now, and
hmm,
so I've got a class coming up in that to see if that is in fact maybe a way I could. It's I'm taking action on one idea,
yes, yes.
but I don't have that aha moment going, oh, that's it, because I don't know that much about the podcast yet.
Yeah, no,
So,
absolutely. And you know
and
what? That just is always a good reminder that you need to take action to get clarity. That's the only way you're going to know, is this for me? Is this not for me? Is this something I want to spend time doing? Or you know what? I'm good. I've figured out that this isn't really for me. So, for anyone, Lynette, who's still on live, or anyone who's watching the replay, if you I'm hoping that these exercises were helpful for you. And if you've experienced a light bulb moment today, or even just found the beginning of something you want to say more boldly, I'd love to help you, keep going. Because this is, as I mentioned, this is the type of work that I do with one-to-one clients. We take the moment, the one that says the most about what you do, and we thread it through all of your messaging. And I did just want to share one last anecdote that really helped me understand why this kind of storytelling matters. So there's a psychologist whose name is Jonathan Haidt, and I learned about him through Matthew Dix, who I mentioned earlier. And Jonathan Haidt has described how we have two parts. We've got the elephant, which represents our emotional brain, the part that actually makes decisions, and the mahout, which is the rider on top. So the person who's riding the elephant. And that's our rational brain trying to steer and explain and justify our decisions after the fact. And here's the thing, the elephant moves first. It's our emotions, our gut feeling that connect and decide. The mahout, the rider, just tries to make sense of it later. And that's why your 5 second moment is so powerful. Because imagine if there is a disagreement between the elephant and the mahout, who who is going to win. Hint, it's not going to be the 150-pound rider with a stick and a plan, right? It's going to be the elephant who has the 6-ton weight and the momentum. So, you know, it's about what speaks, but what about your story? What about who you are? What about what you're doing speaks to the elephant? And it's why people trust you before they even know why. So if you want help in shaping what you wrote today into something that does exactly that, I'd love to talk further. I welcome anyone who wants to book a no pressure conversation call with me to see how I can support you. I will put the link in the follow-up email with the link to the replay, so that you know how to reach out to me. And I guess, are there any other, since you're the one live, Lynette, are there any other questions that you have?
No, I mean, it's been really good because it's given me some, a little bit of direction to think in. And I'm hoping I come up
Terrific,
with
terrific. Well, like I said, you'll
aha
get the
moment
replay.
or
Yeah.
5-second.
Yeah, and you'll get the replay in case you have any
Thank
other
you.
questions or you want to reach out or whatever. I'm just so grateful that you took the time to show up today. And like I said, feel
Well, I
free to reach
appreciate you
out.
too, trying to
Yeah.
help. Thank you.
Right. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.